Thank you all for joining me. I am very excited to be with you today. I know how busy educators are every time of year, and I really appreciate the fact that you're here today to learn about something that may help some of your students. What we're going to cover today is Read Naturally Live basics. So we're going to talk about the primary program within the suite of programs that is Read Live. So Read Live has actually 4 programs within it. The very first one on this list is the one we're going to talk about today. It's our primary program. It's the one that was originally created back in a different format, but back in the late 80s. And it is what most people know of us for. The next program that is in there is called Word Warm-Ups Live. We are not going to spend time talking about that today, but we do have webinars and videos on our website that talk about Word Warm-Ups Live, which is a phonics and decoding program. 1 Minute Reader Live is our independent reading program. And so that also has webinars and videos on our website if you're interested in learning more about that program. And then finally, Read Naturally Live Espanol is the same as the English version. So if you are in a Duolingo setting and you want to have both options available, this webinar will actually cover the Spanish version as well, because they are the same. You're just teaching kids to read in Spanish rather than in English. So the Read Live platform, as you can see, is a comprehensive research-based interventions. We've been around for over 30 years. Lots of research has been done that you can find on our website, as well as different evaluation websites, colleges like the University of Oregon and the Florida Center for Reading Research. Our program was developed originally back in the late 80s by a special education Title I teacher in the Minneapolis Public Schools. And so differentiated instruction was at its core, even back when it was being developed. So it's ideal for RTI settings, tier 2, tier 3, special education, pull out, push in, all those different scenarios. It is cloud-based, so students can access it anywhere that they have internet and a device. And the devices that are to be used are iPad, laptop, desktop, or Chromebook. Okay, and they can switch between them. So Read Naturally Live goes from 1st through 8th grade reading level. It has the widest range. Okay, there is some phonics components in the Phonics Series. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Word Warm-Ups Live has 1, 2, and multi-syllabic levels. They're creatively named level 1, 2, and 3. And those are available to anyone with a Read Live license can use 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these programs. Okay, so they're available to anyone with a license, whether it be within a trial or within a paid account. 1 Minute Reader Live, again, is that independent program, and the range there is 1st through mid-5th grade reading level. Never requires teacher support. So I've heard from educators around the country very similar complaints or concerns, and that is that many schools and districts have more struggling readers than they've ever had in the past. And many schools also have fewer teachers, and that's a pretty nasty combination. So 1 Minute Reader Live has been used widely to try to remedy that situation. We can't provide intervention to every kid, but this is a structured, guided, motivating reading program for those kids who need more support, but we don't have the teacher support to provide a formal intervention for them. And then the Spanish version, really the primary difference is that Read Naturally Espanol goes through mid-5th grade level instead of going all the way through 8th. So again, today we're talking about Read Naturally Live. So we're going to focus in there. Primary focuses are fluency, phonics, comprehension. There's support for vocabulary, and there are some spelling activities. Students build fluency through short nonfiction passages that are highly motivating. They increase their reading accuracy as well as expression, because those things are graded and tracked. They strengthen their comprehension and their vocabulary. If they're working in the Phonics Series, they can develop automaticity and decoding. There's 9 steps that students go through. There's only 1 or 2, depending on how you have it set up, that require a teacher's support. So a mixed group of students, all different levels, can all work in the same program in the same room at the same time, but they're getting exactly what they need. And the teacher can manage a group of 6, 7 kids, 8 kids because many of the steps they do are independent. Read Live, Read Naturally Live helps students experience success because each time they practice, they get better. So they get, not only do they see their success, but it's within just a minute. And that really changed the way they view reading and even themselves. So we know there's 5 components to reading. As I mentioned, Read Naturally Live is primarily focusing on fluency, comprehension, vocabulary, and phonics in the phonics program. We all know what fluency is, but just want to take one moment to mention that it is a lot more than rate, as we know. Rate is a piece. We want students to read about the pace in which they speak, right? That shows us they're automatic. We also need them to be accurate, and we need them to have expression. So we need all of those things in order for us to be truly working on fluency. And the reason we care about it isn't just because it's easier to listen to and more fun to read that way, although those are good reasons. But the real reason is that oral reading fluency is incredibly highly correlated with comprehension. Right? We know this. We've known this now for decades. This particular study shows that students, these special education students, the validity coefficient was the highest when they just used an oral reading fluency measure. And that is the case for many, many of our students. So now I'm going to ask us to do just a little interactive portion. I know we can't all hear each other, but I'm going to ask that you participate in this activity so you can really get a feel for how this works. What I want you to do is I want you to read the words that you see on your screen. I'm going to ask you to read them accurately and rapidly and out loud. Okay. When students are working in Read Naturally Live, they read orally. Okay. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. So please read the words you see on your screen. We're only going to read line 1, and then we will read line 2. Again, do it out loud as accurately and rapidly as you can, beginning right here, first 2 lines. Please begin. All right, we'll stop there. Probably most of you got through those first 2 lines. Now what I want you to do is, rather than read the word, I want you to say the color that the word is written in. Again, accurately, rapidly, first 2 lines, and out loud. Okay, so name the color out loud. Please begin. We'll stop there for those of you who got finished. When we're in a room together and we can hear each other, I usually start hearing laughter around the end of the first line because it is kind of surprising how much harder it is. You are so automatic with reading that you're having this internal fight. You're telling your brain, stop reading, right? But your brain doesn't want to stop reading because you're absolutely automatic. It's why if you see something nasty written on a bridge on your way to work, it might offend you because as soon as your eyes lay on it, you know what it says. So reading is multitasking. Dr. Samuels was a professor at the University of Minnesota, and he put forth a theory called the automaticity theory. And it dealt with the fact that reading was multitasking. If we want our students to be good comprehenders, they absolutely have to be automatic with their words. Right? So students who tend to be good candidates for Read Naturally Live are students who are below the 50th percentile on oral reading fluency norms. Okay. Typically that happens in the fall. There's also in the winter, which is why we're doing this webinar now. Many more kids are identified in that winter assessment. And so we have a lot of new students and teachers starting up this time of year. If you take a look at this oral reading fluency norms table, there's a lot more numbers on it. If you take a look at what happens to the students' data from the fall to the winter to the spring, whether they be in the 2nd grade 10th percentile or in the 6th grade 9th percentile, they all get better. Okay. But just getting better isn't going to be enough for our struggling readers, right? Let's take 3rd grade, for example. 75th percentile, 3rd graders come in reading around 104 words correct per minute. Their 25th percentile peers exit the year reading only 91. So they got better too. In fact, they might have even got more, made more progress than their peers, but it's not enough to catch them up. So we need our students to make more progress to catch up. If you think about a struggling reader you have and picture that student in your brain, but then turn on that audio portion of your brain and listen to the student read for a moment. What are some of the things you hear? I always think it's painful, right? It's painful to listen to. It's painful to read that way. They make a lot of mistakes. They ignore punctuation. What we want for our students is automaticity. And in order to get that, we need them to read. And so silent reading is a good system, right? Silent reading is important, but it's not enough. Now, it's not enough in part because some kids don't read during silent reading time, right? Some of them cause problems in the classroom and others just pretend to read. But you are signed in today on a day I'm sure you have lots to do to learn about something that is going to help some of your kids. So I know you're the kind of educators that put the extra effort in, and you get all your kids to read during independent reading time. I'm sure you've done it, right? You've got candy bars all over the classroom. You get every kid to read. Let's take that scenario. In 10 minutes, a proficient reader would easily read 2,000 words in his head, because when students read in their head, they read a little further, they read more words. And so in 10 minutes, 200 words a minute, 2,000 words. Same amount of time, your struggling reader, though, she only reads 50 words in a minute. So after 10 minutes, she's only read 500 words. This is a disparity of 7,500 words in just one school week. If this is the only time these two kids practice, and we know the difference there too, right? So it's a very big thing that we're up against. And luckily, Read Naturally, what it does better than any other program I've seen is it gets students in the act of reading as much as possible, so they have a chance at catching up. One of the 3 strategies is teacher modeling. Students read along with the narrator that's in the computer. The story is read at a pace that they can actively read along out loud with their mouths. So they see, hear, say words all at the same time. You're going to get to see that in a minute when I walk you through the steps. They practice reading the same passage many, many times. It's mastery learning. We do that in education all the time. Students read the same passage until they've mastered the words in that passage. Not just so they're better the 10th time they read the passage, but so that they've mastered those words well enough, they can read them somewhere else. Okay, that transference is what is the key part. And then finally, progress monitoring, and not progress monitoring that you have to do extra work on, but rather progress monitoring that's automatically collected as students work through the program. And not only is it available to you in beautiful reports, it's available to the kid at the moment he's doing it. And it is incredibly motivating. They start to realize, I can do this. I can sound like my teacher does when she reads if I practice. And we know in education, you got to hook the kid. And that progress monitoring is what does that. So these 3 strategies make the Read Naturally strategy, which is what is used actually in all 4 of the programs within Read Live. So 1-minute reader live, word warm-ups live, and both languages of Read Naturally live all use these 3 strategies. Candace Einert was getting her master's degree when she created this program back in the late 80s. And she used this system with a select group of her students. She tried it with her special ed students first. The other kids were still getting what she believed was really good reading instruction. But as you can see, her title kids didn't make nearly as much gains when they were getting a different kind of reading instruction than this new system she created. So of course, she had to let her Title I kids try it too, and they made significant more gains. Now, this is just a little case study from back over 30 years ago. Since then, there's been many formalized studies done by universities, control group studies. Feel free to look out for those if you need that information. The content that's available in Read Naturally Live, we actually have 3 different series. The Sequence Series, there's 13 levels. The Phonics Series has 6, and the Idioms Series has 4. The program is ideal for students who are reading at or below an 8th grade reading level. So we're used in elementary, middle, high school, and even adult literacy programs. And ideally, you would use this program 3 to 5 sessions a week for 30 to 45 minutes each time. Okay. So here you can see a table that lists all of the different levels that we have available: Sequence Series, Phonics Series, Idioms. You can see in the Phonics Series over on the right, that table tells you which skills are taught at different levels. Okay, so if you have a student who's reading at a mid-1st grade level and they struggle with long vowels, well, they can work on phonics in the Phonics Series, and then they work on comprehension, fluency, phonics as well. In third grade, we've got a student could pick from many different options. Whereas if a student was working in early fifth grade, there's only one option there. Okay, so it depends on the needs of the student and where their readability is at. The sequence series has a little bit more of a focus on vocabulary because keywords is about vocabulary. There's also an optional Spanish read along. And at the end, there's a written retell if you choose to have students do it. The Phonics series, their keyword step is not about vocabulary, but rather a phonics lesson. The words in the story, many of them are dedicated to a particular sound. And then instead of a retell, there's a word list. Students read down the columns and across rows until they've mastered those words. And then they practice writing them, spelling them. So there's decoding and then encoding. And the Idioms series focuses on idioms, keywords, of course, are phrases, right? And so those are kind of fun stories that from third through mid fourth grade reading level. It's typically used in a resource room, reading lab, in the back room at a station or computer lab. Ideally, you would have one teacher or para to every 8 students. Well, ideally, you would have one teacher to every maybe 3 or 4 students, but it is definitely doable with 6, 7, 8 students for every teacher. That teacher can be a paraprofessional, could even be a really good parent volunteer if you needed it to be. And again, that's 30 to 45 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. Placement is built into the program. I'm going to show you in a minute where you can do that. So individualized placement only takes about 5 minutes per student. And it is essential that you place them in our placement program. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is when we get there. So in order to start, you have to get your students added, you have to place them, and then you have to train them. We have a lesson plan. If you want to take your whole group of students through a lesson plan that is led by you, we have that created for you to follow along with. But we also have student training videos. In fact, each of the 4 programs has a separate set of videos dedicated to that program. So if your students are just doing Read Naturally Live, they could watch the Read Naturally Live videos to learn how to do it. But if they're also doing 1 Minute Reader Live, then they could watch those videos as well to learn specifically about 1 Minute Reader Live. So now we're going to go in and start out in the teacher module. I'm going to show you how to enroll the students, give them a license, how you can adjust story options. Every step is adjustable, and that's really important to know. So not only do we differentiate based on level that they're reading at, based on the series that makes the most sense for them, based on the story goal that makes the most sense for each individual child, but then we can also adjust the steps to be ideal for each individual student. I'll show you on our website where you can find those student training videos, how to do the placement test. We'll walk through the student steps, and I'll show you a couple reports. So here are the student steps that we will do in just a moment. So I'm going to pop out of the PowerPoint now and actually go onto a website where I'm going to log in first as a staff member. So when I log in as a staff member, I click log in. There are a couple options from this main page. You can go ahead and get started, go to the home page, or you can go to the orientation and resources page. In there, it will tell you what your role is. Just like in a building, some of you who work at your school are administrators, some of you are teachers, some of you are assistants. So I am currently logged in as a teacher. And because I'm a teacher, my most likely steps are I'm going to need to add my students, place my students, and prepare my students. If I'm logged in as administrator, my first step might be to add schools and add staff, right? And then those staff members can add their own students. Okay, so when I go to the home page, I want you to notice that there's a number of different rectangles that you see on your screen. We call those tiles. Each rectangle has a little list of bullets underneath, and that tells you what you can do within that tile. Okay, you can also access those places through this drop-down menu in the upper left-hand corner. So notice they're named the same. Orientation and resources is the first. It's also the first rectangle. Reports is the last. Reports is the last rectangle. Okay, so to add your students, that's what we'll do first. Of course, then you're going to go to student setup, right? Hopefully they're named logically enough that you can identify where to go. I love this page because there's only one button and it is add student. So you go ahead and click add student. You enter the student's name, first name, last name. You only need to fill in a field if there's an asterisk in front of it. The student needs to have a grade. The school, if there's only one school in the account, you can just select, of course, that one. You enter the student's user ID and their password. User IDs need to be unique. Passwords do not need to be. They can be, but they don't have to be. And now you're going to see this part where it says license the student. Yes. If you are adding the student, you most likely are adding them because you want them to use the program. If you want them to use the program, they have to have a license. Okay. So you click yes, and you select yourself as their lead teacher. Right. So now you can see the student automatically has access to Read Naturally Live. That's the primary program. It's what probably 90% of our students using Read Live use Read Naturally Live. The other program that we automatically grant access to is 1 Minute Reader Live. That's that totally independent reading program. And we give students access to that right off the bat because it is a great weighting activity for when your students are in your room and you have to place each student individually. I'm guessing you don't have one kid at a time. If you do, you're very lucky, but most of us don't. And so you can have all your students working in that independent program, 1 Minute Reader Live, and then that will allow you the freedom to pull one student at a time up to your desk, up to your computer, where you can do placement with them one at a time while they're getting structured, guided, motivating reading in that independent program. So then you'd click Save and Add Another or Save and Close. Okay, and now your student is added within this account. I'm going to go back to my home page. Okay, I've shown you how to add a student and give them a license, right? Now I'm going to show you how to place a student in Read Naturally Live. So then I'm going to go to the tile marked Read Naturally Live, and look, the first item under there is Place My Licensed Student. So I click on that box. Okay. I want you to notice at the bottom, there is a toolbar where you can scroll right to left. Okay. Some screens auto fit differently than other screens. So you may need to scroll over in order to see this column where you can see this place button over on the kind of the right quarter of my screen. Notice that the next three columns, series, level, and goal, are filled in for most of my students because they've been placed. But I have a couple students down here who have not been placed yet. Okay, so I can click on the place button next to their name. And now it provides me with instructions. And I say that tongue-in-cheek a little bit because I'm going to tell you to read the instructions, but I'm also going to tell you I'm a person who doesn't like to read instructions. So I understand that can feel a little intimidating sometimes, but they really are quite simple. If you look what it says to begin, they want you to estimate this student's reading level and then select the corresponding placement testing level below. Okay, so you're going to select one of these levels. Then click Next and test the student in that level. So you're going to pull your student up here, sitting next to you, looking at your computer, and you're going to just think, what level do I think this student's reading at? Now, if your student has a phonics issue, you might want to click on these circles with the I in there to see which phonics skills are taught at which readability. Okay, so if your student struggles with blends and digraphs, for example, well, that's taught at the early second grade level. You can see the Phonics Series is available at that readability. You can click 2.0, click Next. Now, when the student is sitting next to you, you're going to say to that student, read for me as well as you can. As soon as I hear you start reading, I'm going to click Start Timer. And when the student begins reading out loud to you, you click Start Timer. You're familiar with this kind of an assessment. It's just a fluency assessment. So as the student's reading, you're keeping track of how many mistakes the student makes. Okay. At the end of the minute, you're going to enter the number of missed words into this rectangle. Okay. The computer doesn't hear the student, you do. And you enter the missed words into that rectangle. Now, this placement process is going to put students in a level that is slightly above their instructional level. And that is by design, because the program provides a ton of support for the student. They get to read along with audio support. They get to practice reading the same thing over and over again. Because of that support, they can function at a level that's higher than they could if they didn't have that support. Okay, so if you think, oh, that level seems a little high. If you think that level seems a little high, that's by design. Okay. So the audio support said to me, click on the last word you read when the bell sounded. Okay, so you select the last word the student read, then you enter the number of missed words in this box and click next. And now I can see that the student, when I gave them level 2.0, this student read 50 words correctly in a minute. That is within the placement range. So because of that, the computer is saying, yep, stop testing, and you can pick one of these 3 levels, either the sequence series, or if the student struggles with digraphs or blends, you could put them in a phonics level. Okay. If the student didn't place in this level, the computer would recommend that if you test it in a higher level or test in a lower level. Okay, so the computer really holds your hand quite well through this. If you disagree with the computer for some reason, you can click continue testing instead and select something else if you, for some reason, believe you need to try another level as well. Otherwise, you simply select the level you think makes the most sense based on your options. You click next, and now the student has been put in the sequence series, level 2.0, with a story goal of 80. Okay, that is the story goal. You're going to see that when we go through the steps. We want students to be able to read the story at that pace after going through all the steps in one story. So not at the beginning of a story, but at the very end, after they've practiced many times. And so now I can see that this student is placed in level 2.0 with a goal of 80. Okay. The last thing I want to mention before I go through student steps has to do with this big blue button up here that says change story options for selected. When I select a student and then click on that box, it brings me to a list of all of the steps that the student can go through. Every step is adjustable. So let's say I'm working with second graders and typing is not going to be a good match for a second grader. I can turn off or deselect prediction, and I can turn off or deselect retell, so they don't have to worry about that much keyboarding. Okay, so as I go through the student steps, I want you to be listening for that. Listen for when I give little tips about when you might adjust a step based on a specific characteristic of an individual student. Okay, so I'll mention some of those things as we go through the student steps. So now I am going to log in as a student. I go to the same URL address that I went to as a staff member, and I click login. Molly Anderson is the name of the student who's working in this program. She has access to all 4 programs. Okay, today we're just talking about Read Naturally Live, so that's all we're going to go into. But the only reason she has a button for each program is because I've given her access to each program. Okay, so if you don't want the students to have access to the Spanish version, you just won't give them access. They won't even see this button.
Please select a story.
So now we have 12 stories presented at a time. They're all nonfiction. There's 24 in each level, so they're broken up into 2 groups of 12. This student is working in the sequence series, level 3.5, with a story goal of 120.
Old Faithful.
Click each key word to learn the word and what it means.
Eruption. An eruption is an explosion in which fire, smoke, or liquid shoots out of something. A volcanic eruption shoots out lava and ash.
If you notice in the lower right-hand corner, the next button is disabled. I can't click it until I've clicked all my keywords and read along with their definitions.
Geyser. A geyser is a hole in the ground from which water or steam shoots out.
Sometimes there's a picture like geyser. Other times that's hard to do, so then we might use it in a sentence.
Predictable. Predictable means easy to tell what will happen in the future. The football game was predictable. It was easy to tell which team would win.
Now, had you selected the Phonics series for the student, their keywords would not be defined, but rather they would be dedicated to a particular sound or pattern. And the audio support would provide a little lesson on that sound, and then they'd practice reading words of a similar sound. So keywords in the Phonics series is about phonics rather than vocabulary.
Spews. Spews means sends out with great force or speed. A volcano spews lava when it erupts.
Click a word again, or click Next to continue. Look at the story title, keywords, and picture. Write a prediction about the story. Then, click Next to continue.
So now we have a prediction. It is not meant to be a big writing activity. It's meant to help students focus on comprehension, right? It's a good comprehension strategy. Take a minute, think about what you're going to read before you read it. You will understand it better if you do, okay? And that makes sense for students who are maybe in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? But if you're working with 2nd graders, typing a prediction may not be worth the frustration it causes the student, okay? So a couple workarounds for that. You can leave prediction on and have the students just type one letter into that box. That will remind them to think about what they're going to read, but not force them to get frustrated with the typing, or maybe they just type one of the key words in that box. The other thing you can do is turn it off. Now, I showed you how you can turn it off from the staff module. Remember that button I showed you, story options? That's how you can adjust the steps when you're logged into the staff module. But when a student is working, you can make changes at that moment too. Actually, that's probably when you will make the most changes. Notice there's a button in the upper right-hand corner where there's a picture of an apple and it says teacher. That button is available on every student's screen, so you can go ahead and click on that at any point and enter your teacher login credentials. It will bring you to a teacher menu. From here, you can print stories, awards, you can look at reports and data. You can change their level or goal, and you can change the story options. So in this case, I might say, you know what, Molly is super irritated with typing. I'm going to turn off prediction. I'm also going to turn off retell and click save. Okay, so that's another way you can make changes. Notice after the prediction step, the next step is the cold timing step, and I have it on the default setting, which is the teacher is required. However, you can make it so students can do that step on their own if you want to or need to, okay? At first, please be with the students so that you have accurate data at the beginning of an intervention, so that you have accurate data when you try to decide if they're in the right spot, and so that you can teach them how to do it, okay? So now I'm going to close out of here, and when I do, we're going to go back into the student interface, and we'll go to the cold timing step.
Play Wordtastic while you wait for your teacher. Click the best answer to score points. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you.
The first thing you probably noticed is that the bar at the top and bottom went from blue to red, okay? That red is to signal to the teacher that they should stop and work with that student. So think of the red bar as a stop sign. Whenever you see a student's screen has red on it like this, you go and stop and you work with that student. But while they wait for you, because probably you're working with another student the second they land on this page, right? While they wait, they can play the synonym and antonym vocabulary game.
Bleak is an antonym for.
Every word is clickable. So if some of these words are too hard for them to read, they can click and have it read. They earn 2 points if they get it right. If they get it wrong, they get a different sound. The answer is provided. They do not earn any points, okay? This is okay for a couple minutes, but it isn't okay for much longer than that. So as soon as you can, as the teacher, you're going to click Conduct Cold Timing, enter your login credentials, and now you and the student
click Start Timing and begin reading. Click on the words you don't know to hear them read to you. Click Finished if you finish reading before the bell sounds.
Now you and the student are looking at the student screen. You click Start Timing as soon as the student begins reading. As the student reads from their screen with you either sitting next to or standing right behind or kneeling at their desk, when they make a mistake, you click on that word.
Yellowstone, Wyoming.
It's red for the student. So when they're on their own, they can have it provided to them. It's listed in a difficult word box at the end, so you can review every word that was clicked on. And that is how you keep track of errors. So you need an accurate words correct per minute score. Every word they miss needs to be clicked on.
In, the, to.
However else are they going to learn to read those high frequency words correctly if we don't let them know when they don't do it, right? Their attention needs to be drawn to that. So if you're taking the time to be with them, make sure to maximize that time and click on every word that they miss during that cold timing. Now, if they do this step independently, they'll probably click on the big proper nouns, but they're not even going to know they missed those small words.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
And that's probably okay too, if they don't realize they missed those small small words when they're doing their independent cold timing. Because the very next step, as you can see here, is read along. So even if they didn't realize they made a mistake, they will realize it when they read along with the narrator. Okay, so they're not going to be practicing incorrectly. But now, as the narrator asked me to do, they said, click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
Click Next to continue. Look at how many words you read correctly per minute. Click Next to continue.
87 is the cold timing score. The goal is 120. Now the student goes on to the read along.
Click Start Read Along to read along. Or click Next to continue.
Now the default is 3 required read alongs. I have adjusted that for us. You're welcome. We don't have to listen to the whole story. But ideally, students will read along probably 3 times. Older students and students who are reading very close to grade level probably only need 1 or 2 read-alongs. Okay, so you can adjust that from 0 to 5, right? I also want you to notice all these words that are blue, they are hyperlinked to definitions, so they can get a very robust vocabulary lesson here. Students need to read aloud with the story. So they need to move their lips. I call it whisper reading. So they see, say, and hear the words all at the same time and learn the words they didn't know. After they've done that read along, they go on to the practice step.
Click Start Timing and begin reading.
When they're practicing, they can get support if they need it.
Yellowstone. Suddenly.
They can click on any word they're unsure of. It will keep it track of which words they clicked on. It will deduct it as an error, and it will provide them with the reading of the word. Students need to practice at least 3 times, and they need to reach their goal during the practice. Once they've met those requirements, 3 times, meeting their goal during the practice, then they can go on to the quiz. Okay, I have adjusted the option, so I'm only going to have to practice once, and I will meet my goal on that first practice. But your students might be here for 4, 5, 6, 7 practices. This is that repeated reading. This is the best way to get better at reading. Practice over and over. Okay, so every time they practice, a number appears in their scores box. They get further, they get better. And it teaches them that they can do this. It shows them that they can read the way their teacher reads. It shows them that they are able to make the progress that they want to make in order to catch up to their peers. So this is a very motivating moment for the students.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded. You've reached your goal. You've finished all your practices. Click Start Timing to practice again, or click Next to continue. Click the best answer, and then click Next.
That dinging happy sound is because I got the first question correct. If I get it incorrect, I get a different sound. So students know right away if they're right or wrong. The first 4 questions are always multiple choice. Now we have a short answer. So a little phrase in there is good for some. Others might be too hard to type. Just have them type 1 letter in there. They can tell you the answer to this in a minute when you're working with them for the past step, but depends on the age and the abilities of each individual student. After the short answer, this level has a matching question. The number of questions and the difficulty in the kinds of questions depends on the level. So the highest levels have as many as 9. The lower levels have as few as 5. The higher levels not only have more questions, but they also are more difficult in the nature of the question. So there might be a comparing and contrasting question. There might be a sequencing question.
Retell or summarize the story in your own words. Click Review Story if you want to read the story again.
So now students type a quick prediction if they're in the sequence series and you have it on. I will tell you this is the most commonly turned off step. If you have a student who's 3 grade levels below in reading, you might not feel like you have the luxury to work on writing yet. That's fine. Just turn it off. You can worry about that later once you get him closer to his peers. Okay. If you think you need to work on writing, here's an opportunity to do it. Okay. So again, very adjustable. If your student is young, they are very likely to be working in the Phonics Series. Young students tend to be in the Phonics Series more, and then they will not have a retell. They will have a word list and a spelling activity. So they'll practice decoding and encoding words of a similar pattern.
Now you're ready to pass. Read the story and play Wordtastic until your teacher comes to pass you on this story.
So you notice the screen is red again at the top and bottom. The student can practice reading the story again while she's waiting for the teacher. That's a great thing for her to do, okay? And as soon as the teacher is able, she's going to click that gold button right here that says conduct past activities. And then the teacher login appears and she logs in so the computer knows that the teacher is with the student. And now again, the teacher is listening to the student read out loud. Now, during the cold timing, you can allow the student to do that step independently. You can't allow them to do this step independently. You can allow them to record themselves doing this step, but then you as the teacher need to go in there and listen to the recording. They can't move to the next thing unless you listen to the recording. So in face-to-face learning, teachers do it at the moment that they get to that point. There's 3 requirements you're listening for during this past timing. The first is students have to be accurate. So they have 3 or fewer errors that they're allowed. They're human, so they can make a mistake or 2, but they need to be very accurate. So only 3 or fewer. They also need to have at least some expression. So we have a scale of 1 to 4, and they need to reach that story goal of words correct per minute. So all 3 components of fluency are being checked right here. Then we're going to check on comprehension in a moment, and then on phonics if the kid was in a phonics level.
Click on the last word you read when the bell sounded.
Click the last word. You enter the number of errors that you heard. Here's the rubric for expression rating. So you can decide which rating is the best for what you heard. They love getting to see these graphs. Here is the correct, there's the answer key here if you need to see it. You can have students tell you out loud here if that makes more sense because of their keyboarding skills. Take a look at the retell. If the student's in the Phonics series, they're reading a word list and you're looking at spelling words. Okay. Here is all the review work. So here's where I can show you some reports. You don't have to look at this with the student, but you can. If you want to, you can go back in the story and the question that they missed, see what the student put as their answer, see what the correct answer is, and help the student find that answer in the text. You don't have to, but you can. You can also scroll further down and look at what all the difficult words were and have the student read those in isolation. The next report over is fluency. It's cold scores, hot scores, expression ratings, errors on cold timings, errors on past timing, lots of data in that fluency graph. You also have a comprehension graph, which tells you how they do overall on comprehension, as well as how they did on specific kinds of comprehension questions. So here I can see main idea is troublesome for this particular student. Now we are on that final pass remedial action screen. You want all gold stars in the results column. It's not going to happen every time. It will happen sometimes, but sometimes there's going to be 1 or more red X. You select the remedial action that is directly across from the issue. So in this case, I'm going to have the student go back and redo the missed quiz questions. I can allow them to pass with current scores if I choose to, but I like to hold students accountable. So we'll go back for those missed questions.
Click the best answer and then click next.
If the student gets it right, she's done. She doesn't even need you again.
Congratulations. You passed this story. Click done to finish.
Medals and blue ribbons. She did as well as possible. She gets both. Okay. Otherwise, if she met the requirement but was not as well as possible, then she just gets the medal.
Please select a story.
It takes about 35 to 45 minutes to get through all of these steps. So students log out when the bell rings. When they log back in, it'll pick them up where they left off. You want them passing multiple stories a week. Okay, and I want to stress the importance of that. So getting them an incentive program, a motivating factor to get them to be passing as many stories a week is a very important thing to focus on. The more stories they pass, the more progress they will make because they're in the act of reading more. All right, I am going to, that is all we have for the steps. And so, as you can see, we talked primarily about Read Naturally Live today. We are right up against the end, so I'm not going to open it up for a lot more questions. I do have one that's sitting open now, so I'm going to answer that quickly. It's a question about creating folders for each student with motivating trackers and progress monitoring. Yeah, a lot of times what people will do is they'll create a folder for each student, maybe in the folder or along with the folder are the headphones the student uses to go log into the computer. And then there are some really fun things we have on our website that I do want to direct you to. If you go to our printables, there are some fun resources that we have on our website that you can put in this folder with motivational things in there. For example, we have Avery labels. So each story from each level, when they pass a story, they can peel that label off and either put it on their folder, or even better, put it on a board on the wall. And then you can keep track of how many stories each student passed, how many stories the whole group passed, and there can be rewards and incentives for that. We also have a weekly story tracker. That's another thing that's a good motivational tool, maybe to keep in that folder that you're asking about. We have difficult word list worksheet that they can work on if a student needs more work on vocabulary. So this printable blog, I'm going to put that in the box as well. In the chat box, so you can access that. I want to thank all of you for your time. We did go over a little, so I apologize for that. Please do fill out the survey that's going to pop up when this webinar is over. There is a place in there to let us know how we did, so we can improve this in the future. Also, if you have questions, you can ask them in there, and we will respond to your questions via email as soon as we can. So I appreciate all of your time and your attention. Please reach out to us when your questions arise. We are more than happy to help you. It's why we're here. So we hope to hear from you. Thank you very much for your time today, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.